I didn't set off to write a book, but I did know I wanted to write a book. I just didn't know when it would become a book.
Welcome. Okay. I guess both Smriti and me were quite nervous today, but I'm really, really excited about this for many reasons. One, this is a special edition of Books Beyond Borders, as you know, and it's also like it's a special edition because it's a special edition for Sunday Sessions, which is a show we had up and running during the COVID pandemic era, and that was a completely different era, as you all might probably remember. And we had 2 seasons of Sunday Sessions, and then we closed it after life started to kick back into normalcy after the pandemic. So yeah, that's the story with Sunday Sessions. But if you are somebody who's watched Sunday Sessions in the past, then you know that this is about having conversations with writers, artists, and an attempt to understand the process of their creating the art that they create, but also a process that helps us understand who we become as we create art, or as we put ourselves out there bravely through the work we create, which is something Smriti has done through her book. So today we will be talking about her book, Smriti's first novel. And also I have like a formal introduction for Smriti as well as Books Beyond Borders, which I want to read out, and then I'll hand over to Smriti so that she can say hello to you. So quickly, Books Beyond Borders, BBB, is an online book club that brings together readers from across South Asia and engages them in critical discussions on the various themes and topics that a particular book delves into. Currently, BBB is being run by the US Embassy's Book Bus. For the month of August, we will be discussing Where the Crawdads Sing by Taylor Owens, which also happens to be a film I really like watching. So details for this can be found on the social media channels for Book Beyond Borders, the link for which will be shared in the chat or comment section. And after that, I do want to read you a little intro for Smriti, for those of you who haven't met her before. So Smriti Ravindra is a Nepali Indian writer. I also just call her Miti because, full disclosure, Smriti and I are childhood friends. And that's why this conversation is really important to me. Smriti holds an MFA in creative writing from North Carolina State University, and her works have been published globally, including the US, India, and Nepal. The Woman Who Climbed Trees is her first novel, as I also mentioned earlier. And Smriti currently lives in Mumbai, India. Welcome, Smriti.
Hi.
It's funny to say that, but yeah. Okay, over to you. Do you want to say hello to our
Yes.
audience?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So I have no clue what this evening is all about because Prateebha hasn't told me what it's all about. So we are going to just let it be with her, and you tell me what I have to do, and I'll do that. Yes.
Okay. I want to laugh, but okay, I'm trying not to laugh right now. So this is the plan for the day. So we have received a lot of questions from all of you through the registration process. So I want to honor those questions and begin with those questions first. And then we'll also pick up the threads from that conversation as we go along. So let me quickly go to some of the questions here in the chat box. I'm just going to scroll up. And so this is a question from Nazneen from Pakistan. And she wants to know, how did you start your career as a writer? And what kind of difficulties did you face during your journey as a writer? And how did you manage? It's a long question. But I think it speaks around the same theme. So perhaps we can start with that.
How did I start my career as a writer. Well, actually, Prateebha knows about that more than I do. We were both in Kathmandu when we both started writing for the newspaper, and we started writing for the newspaper because one, my dad wouldn't give me pocket money, and I really wanted pocket money, and so the newspaper used to pay how much, Prati? $400 an article.
It was the Rising Nepal was 400. Kathmandu Post was 600.
We were very rich. 400 and 600. And so Prati and I started writing when we were in college so that we could get some pocket money and then blow it up eating momos and having pastry. That was it. That's how the writing career started. Never thought of it as a writing career, always thought of it as pocket money. And if there was a sweater I liked, time for an article. If there was a movie that came out, time for an article. And I think we were very fortunate because both like Prati, I, and some other friends of mine, even my brother actually jumped in.
Because
he jumped in. He said, "Oh, this is really cool way to make some money," and so that's how it started, and it was fun, and so that's how it started. But it was much then, and then I decided to get myself an MFA. And I got it, which was quite surprising. I got into a college, so I was very happy about that. And during college, I realized that I actually took the MFA because I didn't want to study. And somebody told me, if you do an MFA, kehi padnu pardaina, ghumera basche ni huncha, purano kehi saman lekha, and that's enough. And you'll just get through college. You won't have to do anything. And I thought it was a really good idea. But then when I was doing workshops, and there were people who were so serious around me, and I really started enjoying writing. The challenges have been many. Well, it's not easy to be an artist and to make a living. So there's, from my MFA class, I know that there's just me and there's one other person. Two of us have stayed with writing. Everybody else has dropped it because it's so difficult to make a living with any kind of art. And so there's always been full-time job. There's always been, money making on the side that's going on. So the book has taken me forever to write. It's been, I won't tell you how many years it's been because it's a little embarrassing to reveal the actual number.
That's actually one of the questions from our audience. No. So you might want to get to that data.
Maybe I won't answer it. It's been a really long time. It's been how long? It's been almost 12 years of writing. And one of the reasons it's been 12 years of writing is I was a newly married woman when I started writing it. I became a mom almost instantly after that. And both my husband and I were students when we married, which meant we were dirt poor. And so all of that was happening. And then there was the book happening on the side.
But also, Miti, to interrupt you, I was just thinking like the way I look at it, it's not like you said, okay, I'm going to sit down and write my novel, and then you took 12 years to write it. It was also, I feel like, because I've seen it evolve, I feel like it's also been part of that process because your Sachi stories, which also are part of the novel, these were stories you were writing almost as part of your life when we were teenagers. And then those stories have continued to evolve over the years. And now those and some of the stories you wrote for as newspaper articles for the Kathmandu Post also, and for the Hindu, they also appear in your book, right? So it's not like those.
Yeah, so actually it's the reverse. It's because I was writing the book that I also wrote for Kathmandu Post and the Hindu.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was the reverse. And the day I said to myself that I'm done with the book, I haven't written for any newspaper since because I'm no longer writing the book. So I have nothing to say to the newspapers anymore. And so it's the reverse of it. I didn't set off to write a book, but I did know I wanted to write a book. I just didn't know when it would become a book. But I know that for the longest time, I've wanted to write a book.
And has it been cathartic? Again, I'm going to connect my questions with the questions from the readers as well. So
sure.
One of the questions we received is like, how does it feel now that the story is in the hands of the readers?
I was honest. I'm going to be as honest as I can be. And therefore I might sound awkward and even very unintelligent, because I don't think I have really processed how I feel even now, because it's still so fresh and it's out there. Every time somebody tells me they've read the book, I feel really happy. But at the same time, I immediately want to not talk about it. And, and I have no clue what it is that I'm actually feeling, that I don't want to talk about it. When I was writing, also, I didn't want to talk about it. And for instance, I know that I never talked to you about it. I think I only, 2-3 years ago that I started talking about saying, and it's been, so I think both the process of writing and now the book is out, I don't know how to talk about it. And I don't know how to feel about it. And I don't really know why that is or what that means. But yes, has it been cathartic? Yes, because I really needed to say some of the things that I've said in the book. And I feel I haven't finished saying them yet. So while it does feel cathartic, it also feels kind of incomplete. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes. So yes, cathartic. At the same time, I feel you can never really say what you really wanted to say. It never comes off that way. Then you end up feeling a little inauthentic. You wonder if you should have done it differently. So all of that's going on in me. And maybe that's because it's still so new. It's still my first book. I still don't know how to come to terms with that. So yeah, so that's how it is. I'm sorry, I'm at home. This is perils of work from home. Yes.
That's fine.
Should I look?
No,
it's okay.
Keep it away.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, because as I said, I'm just going to take questions from the audience first before I ask you my own. Yeah. So there's also this question about the process of writing for you, the researching process for the novel, and we were talking during the time I was reading your novel, and there was a lot of thinking through that went into it for me too as a reader when I was reading it, because there are some of these. I feel like there's a lot of signposting, but there's also, because we were growing up together, also like I wondered how you would remember certain details that kind of came back to me because I was reading the book. Like we used to have those massive boards along the roads with Lake King Birendra's quotations on them, and like I'd completely forgotten about those things, and reading your book brought those things back to me, and I was like, yeah. And then all these details about the ring road where we were growing up, and sometimes I think with memory, like I feel this all the time. I don't know if it's the same for others, but I feel like there's so many things I just want to cling to in my memory, because I also grieve their loss. And when I think about the Maharajganj I was growing up in, where we were growing up in, it was such a beautiful place, like that, the ring road, the road where you would have to wait for like 5 minutes before you saw another car or bus pass, and all those trees along the T track and the water hyacinths, and there were these creeks along the roads, and all of that, like it just seems like something I'm creating in my head now when I think about it. But when I read your book, they're suddenly like they're immortalized for me in the book, because you've also lived those moments with me, right? So it made me wonder, like, what was the research process for you, and how did you keep an account of these things? Or is it just a lot of writing from memory?
There's a lot of writing from memory. This book is a product of homesickness. That's it. I was in the US when I was writing it, and I was terribly homesick. Any festival, I'd get homesick. Birthdays or mourn days, I'd just be like, it's my birthday, I want to go home. Everything was about, I want to go home. But every time I came back home, I would feel like a stranger. I wouldn't, because my neighborhood would have drastically changed. Every time I came back, all the fields, by the time, but now there are no fields left. And I remember.
No, none at all.
Yeah.
And they were just like paddy fields.
Yeah, it was all paddy
burritos, yeah.
And I think, like you, that's something I really grieve. I grieve that Kathmandu. That. And I think when I was in the, when
I
I was
think you're frozen now. You froze for a little bit. But
can you hear me
carry
though?
on. Mhm.
Yeah.
Carry on.
So, but when I was in the US, I think that's when I would keep that's the image that would keep coming back to me of when everything was just the way I wanted it. So my research was really me sitting down in a room and remembering and trying to remember as much of it as I could, because like you, I keep fearing that I'm going to forget, and then I don't want to forget. So then I think a part of the whole writing process was this desire to remember and to put it down and to not forget. Some of the people I have written about are also people I don't want to forget. And I don't want to forget how they spoke, and I don't want to forget what they would say to me, and I don't want to forget the things we ate. And so I was very, for me, that was really important. I tried for a while to actually set the book in a fictitious place that I'd make up. But then it just started not feeling right because I wanted to remember. So that most of my research was that. I think a little bit of research that I did outside of memory was because I wasn't there in Kathmandu when the 89 or the 92 riots and the changes happened. I was away. And so I didn't have direct access to any memory for that. So that's something I did research for. But even then, I would read about it, but I wouldn't really put that into the book. I just wanted to know so that I had a sense of it. But most of it was from memory. So, or at least, yeah.
But you just talked about how writers put down things, or you put down things because you wanted to remember. I think it's probably true for a lot of people who write. But like for me, I've always thought, like, I don't even like to call myself a writer because I don't think I am. I'm essentially, journalism is what I've done most of my life, right? And I've also always thought I write to stay sane. And I was listening to this podcast earlier today, and Miranda July talks about how for women, writing has been so deeply connected to sanity and the need to stay sane, because there are 1,000 different ways the society or the world in general just tags women as being crazy because they have a mind, and that's something that's reflected in your book as well, right? Like the moment a woman is intelligent, and then we've seen women like Janet Frank, she was actually released from she almost went through lobotomy, and they released her because she won a prize for writing, and it was suddenly like, okay, she's not crazy. She has intelligence, and that's why we have to let her get out of the mental hospital. So I'm just wondering, do you want to share your thoughts on like sanity and writing and women?
So I think one thing that my family gave me is the freedom to think. I think my father was all about get educated. There was a lot of emphasis in my family to get educated. I was allowed to write from a very young age. And I think, therefore, for me, writing hasn't become that thing that has replaced sanity. In fact, writing makes me a little insane. So I think sometimes I think I'm mad for writing. But I know what you're talking about, and that's what I'm talking about in the book, is I recognize very strongly that the fact that my family took pride in my writing. And do you remember that launch our fathers did for us?
Even my family. I mean, everyone thinks your book is their book, like even my aunts.
And we were how old were we?
I remember the launch, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was our family. Like, I know that I wrote for the paper because my father took me to the newspaper and introduced me to the editor.
Yeah. And so, footnote for our audience: when Smriti and I were really young, we came out with this vanity publication, which was like a collection of poems we put together, helped by a friend who was kind enough to sort of design it for us. And so we put in our savings again from the articles that we used to write for the Kathmandu Post and the Rising Nepal. And we had a little book launch at Padma Kanya campus. And both of us cannot bear to look at that book because we are so embarrassed. But Smriti's partner, Ravi Ravindra, he recently told us, you have to own your writing, because if you do not honor it and if you do not value it, how do you expect your readers to do it, right? So just wanted to add that there because she's talking about that launch. Okay.
Yeah. But also, but also talking about, at that time, our professors came together to give us a launch. It was Shailendra sir who,
yes,
published it for us. Yeah, who published it for us.
Yes.
Our fathers through this huge launch. Our mothers thought we were the queens of the world. So I think the validation that writing has given has meant that I don't feel the same struggle with it and don't have the same relationship with it that I know that many other artists and women can sometimes have with their art. But I also recognize that I'm lucky and I'm, that's not everyone's journey. And the women in my book, many of them go mad. And they go mad because they're not allowed to have a mind. I think people like me are fortunate that our families supported that and celebrated that and wanted that. Like my father, I probably shouldn't say this, he'll kill me. But when I had my child, he was very worried. He said, what? You're having a child now? Now what happened to your writing? You'll have to sit and raise the child. I was like, dude, I need to have a child if I want to have a child. And then when I thought of having another child, that freaked him out again. And he's like, now two, how is that going to work out? So there was so much validation for the writing of it. That yes. So it's hard for me personally to associate writing with insanity, but I also know that writing and insanity have actually, art and women have had a hard relationship for the longest time and continue to have a hard relationship. Yes.
I also want to, I'm sorry, I had this question in my head and then, it just got lost. But I was also going to ask you about like some of the earliest influences you had in the forms of like female friendships or like women writers. You've also just like you talked about how uncle nurtured that side of you that wanted to write. You've also had a lot of support from other women writers, for instance, Manjushri, right? So do you want to tell us a little bit about how women can actually support other women in their life to nurture the artists that they are?
I think without women, there's no life for women, period. Artist or no artist, it doesn't matter. But
that's also your book, right?
Yes, I completely believe that women, because we get each other. I think I work in an institute right now that's, I'm a teacher and my staff room is primarily all female. And that's why I love my staff room, because I can go in and I can say, I don't feel good today. I have cramps, and everybody gets me. I don't have to be worried about somebody not getting me. I don't have to explain myself. And I just love that. But in my own writing, women have been instrumental. You have been instrumental, for instance.
As have you, for me.
Yeah, and because it was just fun. And I think, at least I find it, I'm not a hardworking person. So if something is not fun, I'm not going to do it. So it just became fun. And there was Annie. I think Annie's been probably my biggest influence, not just as a female and a friend, but as a writer. I think I learned writing from Annie. And I'm talking about Annie Zedi. And if you haven't read her, you should. She's a brilliant writer. And she was my roommate. I think I'm a writer because of Annie. And she was my roommate, and she would write. And I would read her works. And I would be so surprised at, there was this competition we got into once. It was called My Superhero or some nonsense like that. And
something about this now. Yeah, but go on.
Yeah. There was my superhero, my hero, or something. And I tried to be all fancy, and I think I wrote about Mother Teresa. I didn't know true crap about who Mother Teresa was, other than what I had seen pictures of, and I knew she lived somewhere in Calcutta and worked with leprosy. That's all I knew. But I wrote a whole essay about it, and it was a crap essay. Had to be, because I didn't know what I was writing about. And Annie wrote about her mother. And it was one of the most beautiful, beautiful pieces of work I have ever read. And I remember sitting that day and learning. I think I learned that day that you can only write. Writing is not about good sentences. Writing is not about vocabulary. Is about nothing but authenticity and being honest. And I think that's something I've learned from Annie over and over. Every time I read her work, I can see how authentic she is in what she says, and how honest she is in what she says. And of course, she's a brilliant woman. So the things she sees around her are things I might not even notice, but that she will put it out there. And so she's been my biggest influence, both as a friend, as a mentor. She doesn't know she's my mentor. So it's a little bit of Eklavya and Dronacharya business going on out here, but she doesn't know it. But her. And then Manjushri, when I was 21, I thought I had become a writer, and I sent her this manuscript of mine, which was really, really bad manuscript. And Manjushri, who was what? She's at least 10 years older than us, probably. She picked it up. I don't even know why I sent it to her, because I didn't know her. I knew nothing about her. And yet she took that book and she gave me edits and she returned it to me. And of course, it was like a battleground, because it was all red. I don't know why she used a red pen, but she used a red pen and it was completely red. But I also remember it was such a generous thing to do. She didn't know who I was. I was just some shit of a girl. And she took time out and she read it and she gave me honest, critical feedback. And she didn't make fun. Yeah, she didn't make fun of me.
She recognized your talent.
That I don't know. But all I know is she didn't make fun of me. And then I met her for the first time in Wayne's house. Do you remember Wayne? Amsons, yeah. So I met her for the first time in Wayne's house, and she talked to me like as though I was a writer and not just some kid. I literally was 21 years old. And she talked to me, and then Wayne had a reading that was going on in his house a month later, and they invited me over and they told me to read a piece of mine. And I was so bombastic. I sat there and I read a piece of mine. I flung my hair around, and but and it's amazing. It's amazing the kind of support, the kind of trust, the kind of friendships that can come in, and these things matter a lot. And I think your young days and how people receive you matter a lot. So I'm very, very grateful. I'm grateful to my mom because I come from a community where 18 years is too old for a woman to be unmarried. By 17, 18, 19, 20 is way too much. People get married. And my mom put her foot down and she said, nothing doing. My daughter's got to get an education. So I am more educated than all my brothers are put together, I think. I have seen more of the world than my brothers have, because my mom would just not hear of it. And she'd so my mom had this thing she would say, my mom was a Hindi speaker, so I'm going to say it in Hindi. She would say, an uneducated man, he still lives the life of a man. I remember her saying this to me. We were on the terrace and she said,
that wasn't Hindi.
Forget it. I won't say it in Hindi. I'm embarrassed. But she said to me, we were on the terrace and she said to me, you need to go, you need to get educated. You can't get married because there are lots of marriage proposals coming our way at that time.
TVs, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, you remember, right? And so she took me to the terrace and she said, an unmarried man, an uneducated man lives like a man, and an uneducated woman lives like a slave. So unless you want to become a slave, go ahead and get married now. And so I was like, I don't want to become a slave. I don't. So I think the women in my life have been phenomenal. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have them. And that's why this book is all about women. I love women. I do.
I'm just thinking about Auntie right now because she did say like the
darnest things.
Yeah, like I don't think ever, like before her, I don't think I'd ever heard things like that in my life. And she helped shape some of my thoughts as well. And for me, both Annie and you were an influence, but I think also her, because and I've talked to you about this before. Like I was always so blown away by her fierceness and how authentic she was, and she was just herself. And I think, I just think that's like always stayed with me. Like just
Yeah, I think my mom was a very intelligent, very brave woman. I think you and I have great moms. So
yeah, although my mom probably likes you more than she likes me, which
good.
also brings me into.
I think that's perfect. That's how it should be.
It also makes me think about this thing we're talking about earlier today. About how like mother-daughter relationships are so complex, and every girlfriend I have spoken to agrees with me when I say this. It's always such a complex relationship because there's love, but there's also a lot of other things. There's also this fear that you will turn into your mother and you don't want to be that person. But in that fear is also both resentment and love. And I was just wondering, is that something you want to go into more detail about? Because your some of your characters in the first part of your book kind of touch upon that very briefly. You don't go into more detail there because like Kaveri doesn't really continue to be a character later because you move into Preeti's story later, right? And then you don't go back to those characters. But I'm just wondering if just the first part of your book had become like a full book instead of going into like the rest of the book before Preeti comes into the scene, like what would that world be like for the women there?
That would not be a good world unless, of course, Kumud and Meena could get together. That would be lovely. But that was not going to happen, obviously. But even in the book, I think Meena is Kaveri in many ways. Kaveri is a nutcase. And she has so much anger against her husband. And Meena is a nutcase who has anger against her husband. Of course, Meena is clinical, but then at the same time, I think Kaveri never got tested. I also feel Meena explores her homoerotic side with Kumud, and Preeti explores her homoerotic side with Sachi. And in fact, that parallel in my head was very conscious. The cutting, I don't remember if you remember the scene. I don't know if you remember the scenes from the book, but there's a scene in which Kumud and Meena cut their names on their hands, right? And then at the end of the book, Sachi and Preeti cut their names on their forearms. And so I do think that all the three generations, they do end up resembling one another and becoming one another. So parents are a crazy set of people that we are always trying to escape and always trying to hold on to. And that tension is I think what keeps life interesting, I think, in some ways. But in the book too, that tension is something that I explore because when Meena goes a little batty, Preeti feels both resentment and anger with her mother for ruining her life, but at the same time also understands why that's happening. And so I think that push and pull is apart. Same with Kaveri and Meena. I think Meena is most angry with Kaveri for having abandoned her. At the same time, it's only Kaveri that she loves all the time. It's, her longing always is for Kaveri. And one of the reasons this book came out the way it was is when I was in, I think before I've been away from home all my life. I grew up in hostels since I was a little kid, and then I went away to the US, and then I got married, and now I'm in India. And so I've never really lived at home. But for me, home has always been mom. And it's not because I really know her, because I realize I haven't spent that much time with her to be able to feel the kind of longing I do. But then I think it's just It's just this feeling that if there is anybody in this world who will fight all my battles for me, it would be her. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's how it feels. And and yet I don't want to. She was bat crazy, so I don't want to be crazy like her. So there's that tension, there's that longing and the fear all the time. And now, of course, she's dead, so I can let go of the fear much more easily than I could before. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. Sorry, I just went very quiet because I'm also thinking about Auntie at this point. I have a comment in FB from one of your readers. So I'm just going to read that out. I got sent it on my WhatsApp. So this is from Tanzin Bilal, who says, I'm reading the novel right now and loving it. Thank you, Smriti, for writing such an amazing piece of art.
Thank you. Is Tenzing here?
I don't know. That's on FB, so she should be here. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, because I have so many questions from your readers. I'm just going to ask you one of these other questions I have on my list. So this is about how did you capture the settings and scenes of Sabaila? And I was wondering, maybe you can also sort of speak for Darbhanga as well when you do that, because these are places you spent time in as a visitor, as, you know, like not live there, but you did live there for short phases.
Yeah. So Darbhanga is literally my nani ghar. It's my mother's home. And Sabaila is my dadi ghar. It's my father's ancestral home. So I did spend, good amounts of my childhood, both in Darbhanga and in Sabaila. So how did I capture it? Literally, I sat down on my bed and tried to remember it as it was and put it down. So it was a lot of the book is from lived experience. And these places are just very, very familiar to me. Well, not so much Sabaila, because strangely enough, I haven't spent that much time in Sabaila, but little that I have spent, I have very strong memories of it. And I think of all the places I have lived in as when I was a child, I think it's Sabaila that I have the most visual memory of, because it's the most different from anything. It was very bullock cart and, everything was mud. And our ancestral home, it's no longer a mud hut, but then it was just a bamboo trellis and mud and thatch roof. And so it was so different from anything I experienced in Kathmandu or even in Darbhanga that it's just something that even now I can smell and I can visualize completely, like fully. It just comes to me. So it was easy to do that. That wasn't so difficult to do, actually, because I have a memory of it in me, both places.
Wow. Okay. I'm just thinking about how you also have a very selective memory, right? So you have this habit of like deleting bits from your head that you don't want to recall, and it's almost like you're trying to make space for these other things that are more important. The way we do with our computers. So I've always found that quite amazing about you. Okay. Sorry. To the audience, I'm laughing all the time because I'm also always thinking about some of these things we did when we were younger. Every time I'm talking to Smriti about her book today. So I'm going to take another question from this list I have right in front of me. So how has your MFA experience translated into the publishing experience with this novel? And what's your journey in publishing this book? And how did you land it with HarperCollins?
My MFA, I don't know about the publishing bit of it. Actually, yes, there's a direct relationship. My MFA was, people have this hate relationship with MFA, and many people will tell you that all MFA people write the same way, and I don't know. But I actually really found my MFA very enriching. I had really good, I had really smart colleagues, and they were frighteningly good. And so it was, I think what the MFA gave me was, writing is a solitary vacuum thingy experience, but I was writing with people who would read my work, tell me when it sucked and when it didn't suck. And I really, really learned craft while I was in my MFA classes. How did I land my HarperCollins deal? Well, there was in my MFA. I have a friend, and when he went ahead to do literature and not pursue. Well, he is pursuing writing, but anyways, he was doing literature then, and he'd finished his PhD, and he sent me his thesis to read, and I got really upset with him, and I said, "If I read your thesis, you have to read my manuscript." And so I sent him my manuscript. And his wife is a published writer, and she read the manuscript and asked me if I wanted an agent. And I said, yes. So I had no clue at that time that the book was done. Like I had sent it to him because he'd sent me his thesis, and I thought he was taking advantage of me. And I didn't want to be taken advantage of. So I sent him something in return. And so
is he watching this?
No. Thank God. And so they found me an agent, Stephanie. And Stephanie found me HarperCollins. In India, also something very similar happened. My colleague is Rashmi. And Rashmi gave me something to read, and I got very upset. And I said, always I have to read your stuff. You never read my stuff. And so I gave her my stuff. And she never read it, but her husband read it. And her husband's friend is a writer, who is Jerry Pinto. And he gave it to Jerry Pinto, and Jerry Pinto called me and said, do you want an agent? And so that's how it happened. So that's been my publishing journey, is through friends and through readers who liked the book and then connected me to the wider world of agents and publishers, because this is my first book, so I have no clue about anything. Now I do, but I didn't then. Yeah. So if you want to know how to get a book published, make friends and make sure their spouses read your book, even if they don't read your book. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So what about the editing process? What was that like for you?
Editing process?
Mm-hmm.
I had a very different. Actually, my strongest editor has been my agent, Stephanie. Not so much my editor, strangely. Stephanie was amazing, because when she took my book up, she read my book and she told me, you have to change your ending. You have to change your last chapter. It just doesn't work. The last chapter actually took place earlier in the hostel that the two kids go off to. And that's where it ended. And she said, no, that's too much of a scene change. And so she and I went back and forth and wrote both I wrote the epilogue after I had given it to my agent. So that's, and the last chapter too. So that was it. But after that, I didn't have to edit much. I mean, nobody asked me for changes. So that was, I think the wars happened over the covers of the book. I realized that.
Tell us about that.
Well, not wars. Wars is I'm just trying to be melodramatic.
Which you always are.
Yes. But I mean, I realized that your cover and the name of your book really belongs to the publisher. There's very little you do about it. The book, the content belongs to you, but the rest of it because they understand what will sell and what will not sell. So that was where we had most conversations. And I'm very happy with how it turned out, but that's where most conversations happened.
There's a comment from Sachi in the chat. You can read it. So I just wanted to ask you, maybe though, there are two covers, right? There's this.
Yes.
And the other one, which I haven't seen.
Do you want to see it?
Yeah, if you want to show it to the audience, but also tell us which you like more, or do you like both equally, or what's it?
I think I like both. I think they both have very different energies. Wait, let me get it. It's right here. 1 second.
Yeah, go get it. No, I was just saying, I'm just wondering if we have enough time for you to read like a passage. But yeah, just show the book.
So this is the other cover. And for a while, we contemplated keeping the same cover for the Indian edition also. But we decided against it because this works in the US. It's, very Mithila art. And for the US, it would be different. But then we felt that for the South Asian market, would it be very different? And perhaps you wanted something more thematic rather than just something that's Mithila. And so that's so. But I like both the covers. I think they have very different energies.
I like them both too.
Yeah.
So you remember when we were young? We're not young anymore, by the way.
No.
When we were young, we used to go to these poetry reading events. And they were dominated by these elderly Nepali men, right? And I remember every time we finished doing our readings, we were always accused of our poetry being confessional writing. And we often hear, like, most of the time when women write something. And I was talking to my friend Muna about this as well, who's also a writer, Muna Guru. And so every time women come up with something, they tend to be accused of the writing being confessional, does that. And so I'm just wondering if you want to share your thoughts on that. But also, to you, what's the difference between inventing and drawing from life when you're writing?
Well, as far as confessional writing goes, I've been accused of, by my family, not being able to write fiction at all. They say you don't know how to write fiction. Everything you write is something that you've lived through. And so I am deeply confessional. I know no other way of writing. That I do sometimes think of as my limitation, because sometimes I do want to be somebody who can write outside of that space, and I struggle with it. So yes, one, I do draw a lot from what I see, what I have access to. But I also realize that, I wrote many folk tales for this book and lots of songs for this book. And I really enjoyed writing them. Now, I haven't lived them. I haven't obviously not lived through any such, and there are ghost stories in it, and there are all kinds of things in it. And so I realized while writing the folk stories that there isn't such a difference between the lived experience and imagination. We live our imagination daily. We imagine daily. And all you have to do is, at least for me, I don't know how it works for anybody else, but for me, while writing the folk stories, I just had to own my imagination as an experience and say, I don't know anything about Kichkandi, but I've heard of a Kichkandi. And if I were a Kichkandi, this is what would happen to me, and this is what I would want, and this is what, and that was it. And all of us have a Kichkandi inside them. So I just had to own it. And the moment I did, it became easier to write. And I keep thinking to myself, people write sci-fi. I find sci-fi the most scary genre because that's like completely outside of the sphere of even you. People are writing about things that are happening in other galaxies. I don't know how that happens. But I think while writing the folk stories, I got the tiny, I'm not claiming that I can write a sci-fi. That sounds really scary. But I got a glimpse of what that would be like. That you just have to own your imagination. Think of it as something you live and write it. Does that make sense? And I love confessional writing, so I don't care what anybody has to say. And I love women, so I think women writing rocks because it's confessional and it's great. Too bad fathers. Yes. I can't hear you. You are mute.
Oh, okay. There I am. Yeah, I just wanted to say, because we have five more minutes, right? So I need to stop asking you questions soon, but I just want to see if there's any question that I should not be leaving out. I do want to go into more detail about female friendships, but I think we did talk about that a little bit in the beginning as well. I was actually going to ask you if you want to close with some sort of reading,
Sure.
so that the audience can get like a taste of your book if they haven't actually seen the book, right? Because it helps put things into context, I think. So, do you have a chapter you want to read?
Sure. Yes, I don't mind reading the prologue only because that's the one thing I've practiced. So I don't mind reading it. I'll share screen so that the audience can read along with me. The Woman Who Climbed Trees, the prologue. A man had 2 children, and one day his wife died. So the man went looking for another wife, but no woman could be burdened by the children, and the man remained unmarried for some years. Then one day the man went to a neighboring village for some work and heard of a family that had a girl of marriageable age. After he had finished his work, the man went up to the family's house and made inquiries about the girl's age, color, and robustness. Satisfied, he offered himself as a groom. He had wealth, he said, and lots of youth left in him. He would take care of the girl, and the girl would take care of the children. Show me the children, the girl said, and the man brought his children with him during his next visit. When the girl looked at the children, she fell in love with them. They were good children, shy and calm. They had beautiful, sad eyes, like those of orphans, and they tugged at her heart, and so the girl married the man. For many years, the girl was mother to the sad-eyed children, and eventually their eyes began to glow with joy. They learned mischief, learned songs and dances, played in the fields. They learned to chase after carts and birds. Eventually, they forgot their birth mother and thought of the girl as their real mother. They grew up well, 2 handsome children. One night, the man could not sleep. It was a moon-filled night, and the rays fell silver upon his wife. The tree outside knocked at the window, quiet and musical. The man stayed up, enjoying the night, and when, around an hour after midnight, his wife pushed aside the covers and stepped off the bed, the man was surprised. The girl put on her slippers. She made her way out of the room and toward the front door. She stepped out of the house and disappeared. The man stayed behind, confused. The girl returned with the early hours. She did the same the next day, then the day after. The man was very disturbed by his wife's behavior and decided to follow her. One night, after much thought, he tied a thread to the tip of his wife's hair and held the spool in his hand. When she left the bed, the thread on the spool began to unwind and started a white path behind her. After a good interval had passed, the man followed the thread path. The thread went down the lane that crossed the fields and a cluster of huts. It went past the bazaar, past the temple, and followed the river. It stopped by a large peepal tree and climbed its bark. The man was puzzled. What could this mean? Why had the thread climbed the tree? He looked up, and sure enough, there was his wife, up on the tree, sitting on its branches, enjoying the wind and the stars. The man hid himself behind some bushes, and when he saw his wife readying to leave, he rushed back home. For a month after that, he followed her every night, and every night the girl climbed the tree and sat on its branches. Her feet dangled under her sari. Some nights, she let down her hair, and her hair fell like a waterfall upon her back. The girl was beautiful, and the man was severely in love with her. But despite all this, he was also tormented. What could this mean? What could this mean? Finally, he began to talk about his wife with others. He told his friends, his sisters-in-law, his brothers. Word spread. Ah, said some people, she must be having an affair. But after many nights of watching the tree, it was clear that there was no affair. She must be mad, said others. But all day the girl worked with such surety and skill that insanity had to be ruled out. Then someone said, she must be a witch. Think of it, said someone. We cannot understand anything she does. Why did she marry this man, someone so much older than her? Why did she choose not to have her own children and raise somebody else's? Why do these children love her so? Why does she look more beautiful at night than in the morning? Why does she sit high in a tree? Nobody could answer. The man thought hard about it and decided it was time to let the children know. She does not love you, he said. She is a witch. That is not true, cried the children. She loves us. She feeds us sweets, stitches our clothes, gives us baths, sends us to school, strokes our hair until we fall asleep, and sings in our sleep so we dream sweet. She loves us. Does she? Said the man. Come with me and I will show you. So he took the children along the next night and showed them the girl. She was upon the branches, light as a bird, her hair blowing in the wind, her skin without wrinkles. Now, said the man, is that a woman or a witch? The children stared. They had never seen their mother so lovely, so without worry, so far away, as though she cared nothing for them or anything they knew. She is a witch, they said, and returned home with their father. The next night, the man, the children, the friends, the sisters in law, the brothers, the elders of the village surprised the wife by springing out of the bushes. When the wife fell off the branch, they gave her a good beating. The wife stared at her husband and said nothing. But when she saw her children, she began to weep. Save me, she cried. But the children, who had never seen their mother so beautiful, could not step forward. They looked away and stared into the distance in fear. They pushed their fingers into their ears so they could not hear her scream. Then the villagers carried her to the river. The children stared into the distance. They kept their fingers in their ears and did not hear their mother thrashing under the water, nor did they hear the silence when it came. So that's the prologue.
Thank you for reading that, Niti, for our audience. I also want to share this with the audience that the first draft, when I saw the first draft of it, it was on Smriti's register. And I just want to share that she used to write on these like really big registers. Like, I don't know how to describe them, but they were like big books and all her stories would be on them. And because of her, I also started, I used to write on like smaller notebooks, but then I wanted to get a big one just because I saw that this was a better way of doing it too. So that's been one of her writing processes as well. She would always write these stories. And the first time I read this piece was when you were reading it out of your register and we're sitting on Auntie's bed. And you said, I want you to read this. And that's the first time I saw it. And now here it is in the book. And I just want to tell our audience that this is a really beautifully written book. Smriti writes very beautifully. And I spend a lot of time just having this book in bed with me, just because it felt like such a dear piece of work. And of course, I disagreed with a lot of things with my journalist mind, thinking, okay, this timeline is not right. And what is she talking about? And then just getting mad at her about mixing the timelines and all that sometimes. But then it's such a beautifully written book. And this is something I would recommend to anyone who's looking to read something right now. Also, the thing I felt when I saw this book was we write for our friends. We do write for our readers as well. But I just felt like if we want to write a book, we have to write it for our friends, because more than anyone else in the world, it is going to be your friends who value what you've written the most. So to my friends who are listening to this right now and who are in the process of writing, I am looking forward to reading a book from you, just like this. I mean, just like the way I've received this one. And it's been such a beautiful feeling for me to have a book by a friend. And just wanted to share that, just a bit of my own sentiment there. And thank you, Smriti, it's so strange to call you Smriti. Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, thank you for finding time to do this with us. We're probably going to go offline in a bit. So before we do that, I want to thank the team for making this possible and setting this up together. And this wasn't even going to be it's a special edition because we requested for this. It's not even part of the program, but so gracious and so generous of BookBus to make space for this conversation between Smriti and me. So I'm really, really grateful to the whole team for making this possible. Yukta, Sachi, Pranam, Suvani, also Sonia and Subha, all of you for doing this and making it possible for us. And if you want to continue talking to Smriti, maybe some of you want to stay back and ask her questions if you have questions, because we're going to go off Facebook soon. But also, I want to say she's also on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to connect with her there, you can do that as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Everyone. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And really, really thank you, Book Beyond Borders. And Prateep, thank you. for everything, everything. You've known me since I was, I don't know, that high. So thank you for everything. And thank you for this wonderful session.
Maybe I should share this anecdote. I also see this message in the chat box from Alpha. Thank you for joining. So sweet of you. But I really want to share this anecdote from when we were in the kindergarten. And our school used to be in this building, which was actually somebody's home that had been turned into school.
Are you going to talk about that toy thing again?
Why not?
Okay.
So we used to be in kindergarten, primary school, and there was this room in this building that was never open, right? So it was like the secret room, and we always wondered what was in this room. So one day, Smriti made up this story about this room, which of course, at that time, I didn't know it was a story, but she told me this was a secret room because the room was full of plushies and toys, and how Rustam sir, who was this Parsi man who was a teacher in our school at that time, and now he just comes back to my head. And she said that Rustam sir, because he really likes Smriti and my cousin Siti, he led them into this room, which is full of toys, right? And how they had such a great time. And I was so jealous because I was just a kid, right? And then years later, as a grown-up, I find out this room is actually an attached bathroom. So she's always been a storyteller from the time she was like a child. So
yeah, I've tortured Prati a lot. There are many, many tortured stories we can tell.
Yeah, probably your next book on that.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you everyone for joining. And it wasn't the formal conversation we usually have with writers, just because Smriti is a friend and I couldn't use that tone with her. But thank you everyone once again. And we're probably going to close this conversation now.